Today, I want to talk about embracing life-changing actions inspired by biblical stories. You see, I believe that these stories hold powerful lessons that can transform our lives if we're willing to take action. So, in this video, I want to explore how we can apply these lessons to our own lives and start making meaningful changes. Have you ever felt stuck, like you're trying to make a change in your life, but something's holding you back? Maybe it's fear, maybe it's uncertainty, or maybe it's just a lack of motivation. Whatever it is, it's keeping you from moving forward and making progress towards your goals. I think we've all been there at some point or another. It's frustrating, it's discouraging, and it can be really hard to overcome. Or let's take the story of the prodigal son. Here's a young man who's made a mess of his life, who's squandered his inheritance, and who's ended up in a pigsty. But what does he do? He takes responsibility for his actions, he owns up to his mistakes, and he returns to his father. And what does the father do? He welcomes him back with open arms, he forgives him, and he restores him to his original position. This story teaches us that no matter how far we've fallen, no matter how many mistakes we've made, we can always return to God, we can always seek forgiveness, and we can always start anew. Or let's take the story of Esther, a young Jewish woman who's faced with the challenge of saving her entire nation from destruction. She's afraid, she's uncertain, but she doesn't let that hold her back. She takes a stand, she takes a risk, and she trusts in God to deliver her. And what happens? The king's decree is reversed, the nation is saved, and Esther becomes a hero of the faith. This story teaches us that even in the face of great danger, we can trust in God to deliver us. We can take that stand, we can take that risk, and we can make a difference. One of the most powerful moments in the Bible is when Jesus stands before Pilate and says, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above." Here's a moment where Jesus is faced with the ultimate challenge, the challenge of death itself. But he doesn't back down, he doesn't give in, and he doesn't surrender. He stands tall, he stands firm, and he trusts in God to deliver him. And what happens? The cross becomes the symbol of salvation, and Jesus emerges victorious over death and sin. This story teaches us that even in the face of death itself, we can trust in God to deliver us. We can take that stand, we can take that risk, and we can overcome even the greatest of challenges. One of the biggest struggles we face when trying to make significant changes in our lives is the fear of the unknown. What if we fail? What if we make a mistake? What if we're not good enough? These fears can be paralyzing, and they can keep us from taking action even when we know it's what we need to do. Another struggle we might face is a lack of confidence. We might feel like we're not qualified or equipped to make the changes we want to make. We might feel like we need more education or more experience before we can take action. But the truth is, we don't need to be perfect, and we don't need to have it all figured out before we start. And then there's the struggle of feeling overwhelmed. We might feel like the task ahead of us is just too big, too complicated, or too daunting. We might feel like we're not sure where to start or how to take the first step. But the truth is, we don't need to have it all figured out before we start. We just need to take that first step, and then the next, and then the next. So, how can biblical stories help us overcome these struggles and make meaningful changes in our lives? Let's take a look at the story of David and Goliath, for example. David, the young shepherd boy, was faced with a giant of a problem, literally. But instead of letting fear and uncertainty hold him back, he took action. He trusted in God, he trusted in himself, and he took a step of faith. And in the end, he was victorious. Or let's look at the story of Esther, who risked her own life to stand up for her people and fight against injustice. She didn't let fear or uncertainty hold her back. She took action, and she changed the course of history. Or what about the story of Joseph, who went from being a slave to being a leader? He didn't let his circumstances define him. He took action, he worked hard, and he trusted in God's plan. These stories teach us that we don't need to be held back by fear, uncertainty, or a lack of confidence. We can take action, we can trust in ourselves and in God, and we can make meaningful changes in our lives. One of the most powerful moments in the Bible that serves as a catalyst for change is when Jesus says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." This moment is a turning point for many of the people Jesus interacts with in the Bible. It's a moment when they realize that they don't have to be held back by their past, they don't have to be defined by their circumstances, and they don't have to be limited by their fears. They can be free, they can take action, and they can make meaningful changes in their lives. This moment is relevant to our lives today because it reminds us that we too can be free from the things that hold us back. We too can take action, we too can trust in ourselves and in God, and we too can make meaningful changes in our lives. So what's the takeaway from all of this? I think it's that we don't have to be held back by our fears, our uncertainties, or our lack of confidence. We can take action, we can trust in ourselves and in God, and we can make meaningful changes in our lives. We can apply the lessons from biblical stories to our own lives and start moving forward towards our goals. Thanks for watching, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What's been holding you back from making a change in your life, and how can you apply the lessons from biblical stories to start moving forward? And don't forget to check out my other videos for more inspiring content.